Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the Rockland Metro Show.
Is that what this is?
It is.
Yes.
We meet here every Wednesday from 5 to 6 and talk about local issues, things that are new and interesting to all of you. And if our show is a little bit noisy tonight, we got some
We had to open the doors. It's so hot.
Yeah, we had to open the door because it's wicked hot in here, you know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of talking like this because our guest today's from down east, you know. And I'm going to let you introduce our guest, Joe.
No, we always let our guests, and there's a reason for this. We always let our guests introduce themselves, and the reason is I'm getting old, and I kind of choke up, mentally, and I can't. Oh my God, what is his name? So I will say that our guest this evening is the next governor of Maine. Okay, but maybe you can
heard it here
yourself.
first, folks.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Sam Hunkler, and I'm from Beals Island. Actually, not originally from Beals Island. Originally I'm from Appalachia, from southeast Ohio, which is considered in Belmont County, which is considered Appalachia. And I was
just across from West Virginia.
Just across from West Virginia, yep. And so it's the foothills. It's coal mining country. There was lots of strip mining back there in the 70s, and I have deep mining. That's probably the big industry is fracking. So I was the eighth of 9 children. I was the seventh of...
the seventh son.
Seventh son.
What is that? There's a seventh son tradition. What is the seventh son? What is that? Do you know something about that?
There's a song.
There was a song about the seventh son?
Yeah.
I thought there may be some sort of biblical thing about the seventh son.
Actually, I think that was a whorehouse in New Orleans, Joe, so I think we should move on.
Oh, we'll move on, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing
to do with that.
I do have a question for our guest here because I went to college in Machias, Maine, and my roommate was from Jonesport.
Okay.
And he was on the basketball team because everybody's on the basketball team down east. And
anybody's anybody.
Right. And they say that, and he said, and I want you to confirm this, that the reason that they merged Beals Island and Jonesport high schools was because of the basketball rivalry.
That's a good question that I cannot answer because it was quite a rivalry. And the Beals team, that was back in probably the early 60s, mid 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, they won a state, and they were like, they were like 5 on the team, maybe 6 on the team. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you learn to dribble before you learn to walk when you're down east.
Yeah,
that's
right.
a beautiful area.
How many people live on Beals?
700.
And they had their own high school.
They had their own high school at one point. Yes, they did. Yeah, back in, and then again, and it may have been. It was probably in the 1960s when they combined somewhere in there.
What do you think of that? So we're sort of moving into issues. What do you think of consolidation of schools? Larger districts and children coming from further to a bigger school with more facilities.
One of the concerns I have about that is that the school tends to be the hub of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take away the school, you take away a huge heart of the community. I mean, there's really nothing that brings people together except other than the schools. And they had a lot of pride in their schools. I was talking to a guy in Machias when I was on the streets there, and he was lamenting. I mean, he's an older guy. He came back and he was just really lamenting the fact that they were going to lose their school in Wesley. Mm-hmm. Now, Wesley probably has about 15 students, and yet it's such a hub. I mean, it's just the heart of the community, and without that, and that's what happens to a lot of these places. I mean, that's happened, as you know, lots of different places. It may make sense, financially, but it doesn't. It takes a heart out of a town. It really does.
Going back to what I was saying about the basketball program, what I found about living down in that area is that the entire community came out to the basketball games.
Yes.
I mean, everybody was there.
Yes.
And it was like you wouldn't miss a basketball game.
No. And fortunately, Beals still has their primary school. And so Jonesport and Beals have their separate primary schools, but then they do combine for the high school.
For the high school, right.
Yep.
Right. Well, Sam, you have just, you turned in your signatures just at the end of May.
Right, yes.
So it's just been a couple of weeks that
Yes.
you had a break from collecting signatures. You collected 4,000 signatures and probably more than that in order to make sure you had enough.
I collect about 4,900 signatures altogether, and I went over. I got those signatures for 363 towns in Maine.
363 towns.
Yep. And I traveled all over the state. I put almost 10,000 miles on my Buick Park Avenue to do that. I got 92% of those signatures myself, and I got them mainly in front of post offices. But toward the end of the season, I also was at farmers markets. The problem is that there are so many places I couldn't be because I'm soliciting, and it's a real pain to do this. I mean, and you know, a lot of people, if they have money, they pay volunteers to go out and do this. Well, I did this myself, so I got the vast majority of them myself, and it was probably one of the hardest things I've done for 4 months. It was grueling. It was grueling.
But you must have learned a lot from
I did. I got a real good pulse of the people out there, and it was just interesting to see. I met a lot of good people. That's why I'm here, because I met you, right?
That's it. Yeah. So I have to
And you
disclose that I met Sam in front of the post office in Rockland. I signed his petition. He was a little too busy to talk much at that moment. I was starting to give a lecture about everything I thought had to be done in the state, but he was busy collecting signatures from people. But then I went to his website, which is standwithsam2022.com. Okay,
Yes.
standwithsam2022.com, and I like what I saw. So I want to disclose that I've been interested in helping Sam. Okay, so I'm not only the co-host of this show, but I've invited Sam to come to Rockland also to give a talk at the Grange Hall in St. George, which is what we're going to be doing at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yep.
And that's going to be his first public talk since getting his signatures. The first talk as a candidate, an official candidate for governor. And well, I'll just throw this in. I put together a press release about this. It's in the Buzz this week, and you can, well, I don't know if it's been loaded yet or not on our website, but you check and see. You might go to wrfr.org, and you can click on the Buzz and see if it's there. But I sent that press release out a week ago to all the local papers, and I don't believe that a single one of them printed it. And it taught me that Sam's got a hell of a uphill battle. Basically, the press is going to ignore him.
Well, I tell you, the national press hasn't ignored you because as I was telling you
there's one thing
earlier,
that you found, yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, we were talking just briefly about this before the show. There's a national media called the Epoch Times, and we were talking about how difficult it is to get real news anymore today. Because, I mean, you might know this. I think that all of the media in the United States, or at least the television stations, are owned by 4 companies.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and so this Epoch Times did call you and asked you because... and then maybe you could speak on this, is that Maine, I guess, is one of the few states in the country who has had numerous independents elected to governor.
Well, that's true. There's been 2 in the last 7 have been independents. Yeah, that is true. And I don't know of any other. I know there are other independents, but I think the fact that we've had 2 in the last 7 is pretty unique.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is quite unique because I looked up. There's one of our local representatives is an independent. In fact, 2 of our, not Rockland but nearby, are independent. Jeff Evangelos and is it Sam Plucker? I think.
Plucker,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're the only 2 in the state
Really?
of Maine who are independent. So
right, and I just want to throw this out to anyone who's either listening to us on the radio or watching us on Maine Coast TV tonight. That,
if anyone is, yes.
Well, there might be some people out there, that you'll be at the St. George Grange Hall tonight at 7 o'clock.
7 to 8 o'clock.
And you know that down St. George Way, there's a T Harbour, or Tennant's Harbour as they call it, in Port Clyde. Now, there's a lot of lobstermen down there, and all right, I'm going to talk in my regular voice now. All right, but down in that area, the lobstermen, I've read that Janet Mills is very, very have befriended the lobstermen because of her stance on this right whales thing. And if anyone who's a lobsterman or involved in the lobstering industry would like to find out your stance or would like to talk to you about, the lobstering industry and give you some more information on that, they should come to the St. George Grange Hall tonight to talk with you at 7 o'clock.
And I went out just to get a copy of the Buzz, which has information about Sam. And because I wanted to look up the address, and the St. George Grange Hall is at 32 Wiley's Corner Road in St. George. Well, I guess.
Yeah, maybe you could just take a moment to tell us your take on this, the whole right whales issue.
Well, first of all, that the number of lobster fishermen that would ever come in contact with a right whale is so small that it's almost non-existent. And I would say probably 95% of fishermen aren't, I don't even know if they've seen a right whale because they just don't go out into that. They're inland. They're amongst the islands. They're in the channels. They're not out 5, 10, 20 miles where you might come in contact with a whale. Now, my son fishes. He's a sternman on a boat, and he is one that goes out there. He goes out all year long, and he's never seen no right whale. And so I think that what they're trying to push with all the new gear, and now they want them to put GPSs on their boats. The people doing that don't understand lobster fishing. They don't understand what these guys go through. These guys are not trying. I mean, the fishermen, they want the lobster to be around forever. They're going to conserve. They're the ones who came up with the measure of what size lobster you take, because they know how important it is for them to keep their stock going, and so. They don't want to kill whales, but the last time that was even a right whale was killed in the Maine waters was 15 years ago.
Right. Yeah. We have Dave Merrimont on the program. I don't know if you've met Dave or not.
I mentioned Dave too because we were talking about vaccine mandates, and I was saying that our Democratic state senator was against the vaccine mandates, which was somewhat courageous stand, I thought, for him. But anyway, Dave, you were saying Dave.
Well, I said Dave Merrimont is very involved, and he's on the Marine Fisheries Committee up at the state, and he was saying pretty much the same thing, and that is that the last time there was one known, but as far as the federal government is concerned, this is a major issue,
yes.
I'm sure if you have some lobstermen that show up, they're going to be very concerned because, you talk about key issues here in the state.
Sure.
That's one.
To be fair, I don't have an opinion on this because I don't know enough about it. But if and I'm sure in general, Maine's lobster fishermen would like to preserve the whales and all kinds of good things. But if it came to a question of whether it was going to be possible to go lobster fishing or we kill all the whales, okay, I'm not really sure where it would come down, okay? And so I want to respect what the lobster fishermen think, but I also know that there are times when certain interest groups get their way against the public interest, and that's another thing I'm not saying that's the case here, but it's one has to be a little careful. We all want to get along with the lobstermen if we're in Maine, or especially if you're running for governor. So.
And if my son's on the back of the boat.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Right, and I just want to throw this out here at this moment, and that is, if you do have a question for...
yes.
please give us a call.
593-0013, and we've got a little flashing light there, and if you call, that light will flash. And I even remember to bring out the headphones for us so we can all listen. So if you have a question for the next governor of Maine, you can give us a call at 593-0013. And no doubt you'll have a better question than Steve and I have, so please do call.
Well, there are, I guess there are two other people running for the governor, and I'm trying to think
there's
who
a
they
Republican and a Democrat.
Right.
Paul LePage is the Republican,
Right.
and Janet Mills is the Democrat.
Right. Yeah. You're from down east, but I spent a lot of time up in northern Maine, and it is such an interesting thing to notice the differences between the two. In southern Maine, where we are, all Democrat. All the signs on everybody's lawns are bright blue, okay? Now you go up to northern Maine, up towards Baxter State Park, all red. And the Trump signs are everywhere, and the LePage signs are everywhere. And it's so interesting. And I was wondering, because you've met with a lot of people, what's your sense of the feeling out there?
Why is there this division?
I think probably more than anything, the people in the rural areas want to be left alone. And the more you have government trying to interfere into your life and come in and do mandates and whatever you do, I think that you're going to have a pushback. And I think that's probably one of the major issues or differences in the same my way. The further you get up my way, the more LePage signs you see, and there's a lot. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen any Mill signs, but I've seen a lot of LePage signs so far.
So you think it's the rural arrow about it, right?
Well, I think part of it. I mean, and the other thing is that when you grow up in a rural area, as I did. How do I say it? I think your vision is smaller because you're just not exposed. You're not exposed. I mean, even this now the big thing is this LGBTQ thing. I mean, you're not exposed to that, and when you start talking about that stuff in rural areas, people don't understand it. They don't get it. What are you trying to do? And because they just haven't been exposed as much, so they do tend to be more conservative because they don't have their experience is less. That doesn't make them any different or any worse or better. It's just that they don't have the input. Well, you go down to Portland, and you're exposed to a lot down there. Right. Even being downtown, just being on the streets of Portland, you're exposed to a lot of things you will never see up in northern Maine. I mean,
particularly if you talk gun control.
Yes.
I would imagine the differences are quite large.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, of course, the people in the rural areas tend to hunt more. Number one, they're in the woods more. They are woodsmen and women, and so they live more with the woods and the animals, and so that's how one thing helps them survive is they kill their own meat and So it's a whole another issue. But again, some of that I think is just exposure. Yeah. I mean, there's limited exposure to new ideas and new ways,
Right.
So people in rural areas are more inclined to want to be left alone. Why do you suppose it is that people in urban areas are more inclined to support more government regulation?
Well, I think again because there's a lot more issues. I mean, in urban areas, I mean, there's a lot more diversity. There's a lot more color of people. There's a lot more different ideas being thrown around all the time, and things that whether you want to, you're exposed to. It's more in your face because there's just much more diversity in bigger areas. I mean, that would make sense to me.
Yeah. In these rural areas, you would tend to go to breakfast at the same diner you always go and talk with the same five guys that you always meet with for breakfast.
Right.
And that's kind of the way it is. I mean, I think that's a really good point you brought up.
And if your family is raised in a certain church, it's going to still go to that church. I mean, unless you move out of that town, I mean, that's where you go. I mean, and you go to the same. And when somebody has a benefit supper, you're going to show up, because you know them. They're down the street, you know them. So there's much more community. I think the community is much more close knit. And I mean, there's fractures everywhere, but I think that in general that's how it goes. And they support each other. You break down in your car on the road in Washington County, somebody's going to stop. Before too long at all. Right. It's like
4 or 5 people are going to stop.
Yeah, exactly. 4 or 5 people. And you do that in Portland, and it's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
You're not going to have people stop as quickly, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Why? So I would say that one of the things that's happened over my lifetime is that people trust each other less. And for example, I remember you had on your website, you hitchhiked from Ohio to Loring Air Force Base in Limestone to visit your brother when you were a high school student. And when I was a high school student, then a college student, I did a lot of hitchhiking. I came to Maine from New York City hitchhiking. That was fairly common. Now you don't see any hitchhikers. People are, be afraid to pick you up, and you'd be afraid to be picked up. Mm-hmm. So what has happened? Are people less trustworthy? Are people, is there more of a problem, or is it that people have lost their trust in each other?
Well, I think one problem is that you hear about everything nowadays. If a hitchhiker gets killed, you know it tomorrow, even if they're out in Idaho, That didn't happen 50 years ago. You never heard about that.
I think that's the answer. I think that's exactly the answer.
Yeah, I say, people say the world's getting crazier and crazier and crazier, and I say, well, it's always been crazy. People have always done crazy things to crazy things to people. They've been brutal. Look at the Inquisitions.
Sure,
we've been brutal to one another, but now you know about it.
Yeah.
You didn't know about it. You didn't know all the scary things that could happen.
I think it is really about media and the way, you need to sell your newspaper, you need to sell clicks on your news website, you need to have a story that gets people's attention. So, a story that's saying people are being nice to each other, that doesn't give you any hits. Mm-hmm. But as soon as some crazy person, kills his babysitter, that's going to be national news for sure.
Yep.
But speaking of the media, I want to bring up the media because so much in politics now revolves around money in politics. And I remember when I was in the radio business, man, didn't we look forward to election time because, hey, here we go. They always paid the top rate and, the money just flowed. And I can't imagine it now. You probably, on any given radio station, you probably don't even have time to play any music because it's just one political ad after the other.
Well, that's why people listen to WRFR because you're not constantly being bombarded with ads. Like, listen to radio and all of a sudden they've just sort of sucked you into, all of a sudden they're trying to sell you something.
Right, and you're up against two candidates that are
going to have a lot
big
of money.
Bucket full of money.
Mostly coming from out of state. So, I've been talking with Sam about this. How can you deal with that?
Well, one of the things I am offering is something different. Mm-hmm. And everybody, nobody, how many people enjoy listening to those political ads? Mm-hmm. How many people want to shut it off as soon as it starts? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many? Wouldn't it be nice if people went on there, these politicians, and told them what the great things they were going to do, rather than beat up the other guy, the other person? They're the woman, and that's how it's gotten. And and you know why they do that? Because it works.
Yeah.
You know, apparently, I mean, that's the only reason I see why they keep doing it, because it tends to work, and it tends to. But I don't want to do that. You know, I have no desire to do that. And if they want to, other people want to do that, fine. But that's one of my tenets is I'm not taking any money. I don't want to be part of that. And I can't imagine that the millions that the Democrats and Republicans are going to spend are going to make that much difference in how many new votes they get.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting year now. They talk about the red wave, and I would be terribly surprised if the red wave wasn't a tsunami. I really would, because it's like I can't think of anything that the Democrats have done correctly. Maybe you know of something. I don't know.
Well, I can't think of anything, but I can't think of anything that the Republicans have done correctly either. You know, and this is something that I've been saying for a while now. You know, you look at, I think the fundamental problem in this country, well, I guess that there are various things, but one aspect is a growing income inequality. Maybe that's a symptom, rather, you know, than the cause, but growing income inequality. And if you look at a graph of income inequality from the 50s, when things were much better in those terms, till now, it's a steady thing. If you look at when the Democrats have been in power, when the Republicans have been in power, you don't see any indication that somehow it was better under one party or the other.
That's not
Both
where
parties.
I thought you were going with this. I thought you were going with the influences that are in politics now. And
Well,
how
yes,
that's changed.
yes.
You know,
Well-
I mean, I'm talking about, you know, paid money that comes in. I mean,
Well, that's why, Steve.
if you wanted to get a hold of Susan Collins or Angus King or any of those, you can't even talk with them. You can't even get an appointment with them. We had one of our state legislators that was here, and she wanted to. Now this is a state representative, and she went down to Washington D.C. with Valley Geiger, with a group of other legislators to have an appointment with Susan Collins. Couldn't get it. And, you know, so I think I'm most concerned about the influence of special interests over our representatives, and I'm sure it's more in Washington, but I know it happens in
There's something that,
Augusta.
Steve, that you and I agree on entirely, and I know Sam agrees too. And you voted for Trump, and I did not. Okay, yet we agree on that. I think that's the fundamental thing that people have to realize, that unless they get into the act, that they're just going to get fleeced, and they're being fleeced.
Well, I say we have a government of political parties by politicians for special interest. And so how is it possible, and if it is possible, how do we give it back to the people? How's that possible, to give it back to the people, so you have a government of the people, by the people, for the people? I think that's still possible, but I think that means that we have to give people a voice. One of the things that I've talked to you about, Joe, one of the things that everybody wants me to take a stand. And I can take a stand. I can give you my opinion. And I have ideas and thoughts, but I think it's much more important.
We have a call.
I am just one Mainer. I am just one Mainer, and I want to hear from everybody. And let's see if we can sit down and find something.
Well, let's hear from somebody right now.
Okay.
Let's see what.
Right. Well, we got a caller on the phone. You're on the air.
I'm on the air? No.
You are on the air.
You're on the air.
I don't mean to interrupt.
No. What is your question?
No. Well, okay. I feel like I've interrupted here. I was hoping to be brought in when I would not be interrupted. But anyway,
No. It's better.
This is the thing. My question is this. Again, I feel like I've interrupted here. I was hoping to be brought in.
No, you got to turn your radio down.
Yeah. Okay. I got to move away from that. All right. So, anyway, my question is, being the governor of Maine or the governor of any state, or being in a position of authority, I understand it to be a management position, a position. There's huge challenges. To bring. It's one thing to want to bring people together, to have a vision for the state, which brings people together. So many of us share that vision and appreciate it. But making it real, what do you bring to the table that's going to make it possible for you to actually accomplish this vision?
Well, thank you, brother, for your question.
So I would answer that question by saying that I was a family physician for 38 years. And I had to find a way to communicate with everybody I see, and to find some way to come to a way of treatment or a way of looking at their illness and what they can do about it. And so I believe more than anything I can find common ground with people. And I think that is my big message. How do we find common ground? I can listen to people who are far right. I can listen to people who are far left, and I have that ability to listen. And I think that's more than anything is what we need to have is we need to listen to one another. And in order for us to come together and understand each other, we have got to listen to one another. And I think that's one of the major things I can bring to the governorship is that ability to listen and to lead in that manner. I would like to get everybody at the table, and not just me, and I'd like to get all views there and see if we can come to some kind of common ground. And I think that is needed.
I think that's one of the big benefits of being an independent, in that it seems so much today that the parties, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, get frozen in their positions, and they won't talk to each other. And I think that's the most important thing, as you said, listening to one another.
Yeah, and I guess that maybe there are two reasons for it. One is just, I guess the same process that in the Middle Ages had religious sects fighting with each other. People get this faith, and so they become these political faiths, okay, and they're hating each other and wanting to burn each other at the stake. But another thing is the way that the money interests that finance these. I mean, if you go against them, if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, and you annoy one of their major interest group supporters, they're going to kick you right out of the party because they don't want you there at all. What do you think? We're talking too much, but that's what we do, Sam. We're giving you a break here. But what do you think about this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, again, in order to run for a party, you got to believe in what the party says, and so right away that's going to eliminate a lot of people, because they can't do that. They can't take that platform and say, yes, that I believe everything, and I'm going to stand for that. But that's really what you have to do in our current political party system, is that you've got to hold the line. You got to carry the line, hold the line, because if you don't, you're not going to be there. And it's just become so divisive because of that. And people, again, they don't even talk to one another now. And how can you have a government where you have polarities that can't talk to one another?
I mean, we saw that because I was a supporter of LePage when he first ran for governor. And, of course, there's so many Democrats around Rockland that's basically all you can listen to. And I heard over and over and over again how LePage was so divisive, and that he was always going against what the Democrats wanted to do, and the media hated him, and all of that. And it seems as though that we've got to get past that somehow. Somehow. I don't know how.
And I don't think either party can do that. Yeah. I don't think any party is able to do that, to get past that division and that partisanism, and that's why I do believe it needs to be an independent to do that.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I
You're
definitely
listening
agree.
to the Rockland Metro show here on WRFR,
And you might be watching it on
You-
Maine Coast TV.
right, which is local channel 7, and you can also stream us
Right, go to
on the radio.
wrfr.org, and that caller was when I said brother, that's because he was my brother.
Oh, okay.
Just a disclosure, Ned, in Nobleboro, beyond our signal. Actually, it isn't. At one time, he had a antenna, just the right antenna, way up on his rooftop, and a really good tuner. He could just get us in Nobleboro, but
Yeah,
he
that's a
was
reach.
he was on
Yeah.
he was on online. If you're listening online, there is a sort of a half-second delay,
Okay.
and that's why we could hear in the background, but it was delayed
Right,
like that.
right.
Yeah. So
and we're talking today with independent
candidate for
candidate
governor.
for governor, and we also, I wanted to say, if you have a question for Sam, please give us a call. Our number is 593-0013. We'll be glad to take your call.
You know, it's hard to get people to call. We've learned this, and I think I told you the story, Steve. I met a guy who was with RAI, which is the Italian equivalent of NPR. Okay, nationwide television. Okay, and he said when they did and radio, when they did radio call-ins, they would have some people out there to call because you needed to kind of grease the wheel,
Prime the pump, as
prime
they
the pump.
say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is hard. So if you're listening and you would like to ask a question, please do give us a call. Cause,
And if you're too afraid to call in, you have an opportunity to meet the candidate down tonight.
yeah, at the St. George Grange Hall at 7 o'clock, and you could be one of a small audience, we're guessing. We'll see. And if you are thinking of going and you've got a video camera and you're willing to make a video of it, we'd love to have you come because we were thinking it would be fun. And Sam, you're going to be giving a talk which is as much about medicine as about politics. So
Yes,
tell
yes.
us a little about what you're going to be talking about.
Well, over the years, I've developed this talk, and I call it a perspective of healing. And the basis of that is that probably the most important thing I find in health and medicine is people's perspective of themselves. And if people have a poor opinion of themselves, if they call themselves names, if they put themselves down, if they're very disparaging about themselves, it's very difficult for them to take care of themselves. As I say, it's difficult to take care of a piece of crap. And if you have grown up with a lot of abuse and neglect and trauma, chances are you don't have very good self-esteem. You don't have very good self-awareness, and you don't have very good self-love. And if you don't have that, you're much less likely to take care of yourself. It's just that simple. And so that's kind of the basis of what I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah, it's I find that the attitude makes a big difference in your health.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Attitude is
Well, and stress is a huge factor in illness, right?
stress is a huge factor, but stress is never about what's going on outside of us. It's how we react to what's
Yes.
going outside of
Yes.
us. We're never going to change what goes on outside of us, but we can learn how to respond differently. And that's a big part of it. And in order to do that, we have to know ourselves. You know, as I say, no one is any better than I am. I'm no better than anyone. Who we are is all the same. We all come from the same place, okay? But what we are and how we live our life is very different. That we can choose. We can choose, and we can change. We can change how we treat ourselves. We can change how we treat others. We can change our attitudes, our behaviors. That's what we need to change, and that's what needs to change for us to be more healthy.
You know, several years ago on this program, we had the CEO of Penn Bay Medical Center, which is our local medical center here, and fellow's name was Roy Hitchings, and he retired many years ago. But anyway, very interesting talk we had, and one of the things that he said really struck me, and that was He said the biggest problem that we have in the medical profession is that people don't take care of themselves. And by the time we see them, there's not much left to save, and that if people would take better care of themselves, then it would make our job so much easier.
And we would have less work. And we wouldn't need all the medical care that we dispense. And that's exactly right. And the more people care about themselves, the healthier they're going to be. But that caring for themselves has to start at a very young age. And that's why I keep saying that children are a priority for me. How do we keep children, how do we keep them safe? How do we keep them free of trauma and abuse and neglect? How do we, and so, because the more that they take on, the more they take on the idea that I'm not good enough, that I'm unworthy, that there's something wrong with me. And it becomes a spiritual dis-ease. And with that, it's hard to take care of a piece of crap.
Speaking of children, very much in the news right now, of course, is the Democratic response to the shootings in Texas and elsewhere. And it seems as though, this is not a very popular thing in Maine, but it seems as though that whenever anything happens like that, then they immediately go for the guns. And I was just wondering what your take on this is, because I've heard the other side, and that is that it's more about the mental health of the individual than it is the guns. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts, as being a doctor,
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Number one, I do believe that anybody who's a mass shooter is suicidal because they know they're going to die. Now, the what takes them to that range of evil is a whole other thing, but it's mental illness. It's spiritual illness. And evil exists where there is no love. That's where evil exists. It's completely void of love. That's where it exists. And so that does exist. And so those people that go out and with their semi-automatic weapons and shoot people, they are very, very sick people. There's no doubt about it. And they could possibly just do the same thing with their vehicle. They could run it through a crowd. Like you've heard that happen before. Now the fact though I don't know that we need all the semi-automatic weapons that are out there and the whole idea of the Second Amendment is people trying to defend themselves from the government. I mean, I don't know how our government is as old as it is, and I don't think people have really ever had to defend themselves from the government. Maybe they have. I don't know of any instance of that. But that's the whole idea about the Second Amendment, is that the guns help the citizens protect themselves from the government. That's the whole idea. And I don't know, I made the comment, and somebody really lambasted me for this. I made the comment that people buy guns for two reasons. They buy it because they hunt, or they're afraid. And I said neither of them need semi-automatic weapons, for that.
Right,
but a lot of them think they do because the government's got the semi-automatic weapons. So the citizens should have the same to
well,
fight
they're
back.
afraid of the government.
Exactly.
Well,
if you're afraid of the government,
has not only semi-automatic weapons, they have automatic weapons.
They have drones,
howitzers and nuclear
missile
weapons
systems.
and tanks.
Right. But
so on. Nobody is suggesting that people ought to be able to arm themselves that way.
So it is. I think we do have too many guns. I mean, that's just my own. I mean, and there are accidental deaths, even from children of having guns at home. That and I don't know. I don't think I'm not about taking people's guns away. At the same time, I think there needs to be a lot more safety guards in place for them. But you're right. It is about people who shoot other people are mentally ill. They're spiritually ill, and that's a given. And as long as there are people like that, people are at risk.
Well, I remember reading about the shooter in Texas, and this young lad. He was living with his father. His father was divorced, I guess, and living with his father. Their father worked all the time, and so his father was really never home. So he was spending a lot of time by himself, and you talked about the love and
Well, he wasn't happy at school. He
Right.
didn't have good friends. He was bullied to some extent at school.
Yeah,
and-
I mean, and he had no love, and he didn't have love. Where was his mother? I mean, and that's so often the case, and that happens with so many. Look at the children who have died in this state. That's a big thing, and the DHS and how that's happened. And again, and then you have addicts that are trying to raise kids. I mean, how can you have love for a child when you have to support your addiction every day? So it goes on and on and on.
And there doesn't seem to be the only thing that I hear is we have to hire more mental health professionals, okay? Mm-hmm. But I'm skeptical that we can solve this problem by hiring a lot of mental health professionals. I think we need to be thinking about the mental health of our communities, and we need to be, I just feel like, and maybe that's a difference between the urban and suburban versus the rural, okay, that there is more community in rural areas.
Yes,
and I would guess that if the boy growing up at the farm next door wasn't really being taken care of by his parents, that the neighbor might very well be helping that child.
Or the teacher would know that.
Yes. And the community would be there, not hiring a mental health professional. But now I think, like the fact that people are afraid to hitchhike or to pick up hitchhikers, I think people are afraid to be helping children in their neighborhood because maybe they'd be accused of something, or somehow they feel uncomfortable about it. And also our neighborhoods, we live right here around the radio station, very mixed neighborhoods where there are poorer people and richer people, but a lot of neighborhoods these days are all one or the other, right? So, and well, here I'm ranting, but this whole thing of Black Lives Matter, basically blaming white working class policemen for all these problems in the ghetto and in the poor neighborhoods in the cities. Mm-hmm. No real thinking about what could we do to help those children, okay, who are growing up in a terrible, terrible situation where the only people who have any money are the drug dealers, when I don't see any serious, what about the public schools in those neighborhoods? What are we doing to make that work better for these kids? And we don't seem to be doing anything. But what's your take on that?
Well, I agree. And one of the things I've talked about before is that we need to get the elderly and children together.
Yeah.
We really do, because the elderly have the patience and they have the wisdom and they have the compassion, and they have the affection to give children.
Yes.
And children have something to give the elderly too. And I think that's one place where we can start to make a difference.
Yes.
You're right. Counselors aren't going to make a difference because unless the counselors have done their own work, they're going to have a really difficult time helping others. Number one, and it's also something. I mean, it should be something that's even part of our school system. There needs to be something all the time. We need to be screening kids all the time. Yeah. And you're right. In the rural areas, I think people know about it. What's going on with kids. And there can be more intervention. There is. But the city, people are much more isolated in cities.
And the schools don't bring the community in. No, they're uncomfortable about it. It's like, well, you
in rural areas they do. In rural areas they do. I think they're much
I bet you're
more
right.
of a community.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Rockland Metro Show, and tonight our guest is Sam Hunkler, and he is Maine's independent candidate for governor. And we've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you before we go off the air here, what do you consider the major challenges for the state of Maine in the years ahead?
Probably the biggest thing I find that is affecting our governance and our state is division. How divided we are, and I think that more than anything is what brought me into this wanting to make a difference, because I believe we can make a difference. But we have got to find, when we get down to the heart of the matter, we're all one. When we get down to the heart of the matter, we can all be one, and we've got to find that place. We got to get down to where we see each other as people, as equals, and that we're not. We don't. It's really about seeing people who have opinions rather than that. And if you don't like their opinion, fine. But that's not about not liking the person, because that person is no different than you are. When we get back down to the heart of the thing and who we are, because we are all the same, and we've got to find that again. We've got to find that heart of the matter so that we can sit down and have discussions and work through this division. Because with this division we have, how are we going to solve problems? It just flip-flops back and forth. One, you got this administration, you got the other party, and it just keeps flip-flopping back and forth. And all the people are in the middle saying, what's going on? What's happening here? And so I think more than anything, that is probably the major thing we need to do. We need to learn how to listen to one another. We really need to learn how to see each other as the people we are, because we all have goodness, and we all have to realize that and see that as the bottom line.
I've noticed that this time around, more than any other time in my life, where you had Trump, who came in and changed everything, and then you had Biden that came in and took every single thing that Trump did and changed it. Mm-hmm. And then when whoever comes back in, they're going to take everything that he did and change it back again. And it really, like you said, this flip-flop.
And where are we? Where are the people?
Right.
The people we just sit by and we just kind of say, we're done. I mean, there's nothing we can do, but I believe we can do something.
Well,
but it's not the parties that are going to bring us back to some kind of civility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that message will be... I hope that there will be debates and that the media will not keep you out of those debates. I think the fact that there are only 3 candidates will make it hard for them to say, no, we're not going to have Sam Hunkler here. And you're going to be able to see it happening right there, because those two are going to be going at each other, okay? It'll be fun, Sam. I look forward to your contribution to this election campaign coming up, and I think it'll be a very constructive one, and I appreciate it.
And I hope that if you're listening to us tonight and you've got some time, that you'll take a ride down to St. George.
Yes.
And because you'll be able to meet the candidate down there tonight.
I'll read that address again. It's the
7
St. George
o'clock.
Grange Hall at 7 o'clock. And the address is 32 Wiley's Corner Road,
Right.
Which is about halfway down the peninsula. And we're going to find it, and we hope you find it too.
And tell us where you will be in the next few days. I know you've probably got a hectic campaign schedule.
I'm still in the process. I spent so much time and energy just trying to get my signatures, and I finally did that. And I kind of got burnt out from that. So I'm just kind of regrouping. I'm trying to catch up on a lot of things I had to put on the back burner, for this month. And so I am in the process of coming up with the plan. And so I don't have a whole lot scheduled at this point, but starting next month I'll start going out and doing some talks and maybe being on radio shows or whatever. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet, but I'm in the process of planning that.
Well, we really thank you for joining us tonight here on the Metro Show, and we hope as we get further into the campaign that you will come back and see us again, and and we'll have more to talk about as you gain more.
We'll have to do this again in a few months.
In that, and for those listening, once again, we'll invite you down to the St. George Grange Hall at 7 o'clock, where if you've got some questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, you will be able to do that then.
And meanwhile, stay tuned, because there's another show coming at the top of the hour, and it's much better than this one.